it is great to be here in Bratislava. It's my first time in the city, and I've had a great morning so far. Been wandering around the old town, taking lots of pictures. It helps that you have a beautiful day today, so thank you for laying on great weather. But I don't want to talk about today. I want to talk about tomorrow. I want to talk about the future. I want to talk about the future of work. And the future of work is something that is actually already here. The future is now. So I'm going to talk to you for about 20 minutes. We've got some questions afterwards. But a very quick introduction to our company, Gensler. We're not a kind of faceless organization like there are many of these days. We're actually founded by this gentleman, Art Gensler, 52 years ago in San Francisco. A husband and wife, kind of what they call the Americans would call it like a mom and pop design company, which is now the largest design firm in the world. We have 46 offices all around the world, and we're very multidisciplinary in the work that we do. I'm the head of our consulting practice. I'm an architect, but what fascinates me is really all about, what gets people out of bed in the morning to go to work. So we're going to talk about that during the presentation. So if we think about cities all around the world, the tale of cities is all about work and the city. Cities for hundreds, thousands of years have really all been built on this idea of bringing people together for trade and commerce. So the very early examples of cities, San Gimignano in Tuscany, the first kind of modern skyscraper city, if you like, was really the predecessor for, as Bruno said in his introduction, the early generations of office buildings, places where we actually do our work. Over 100 years ago, Frank Lloyd Wright's Larkin building, but say a little bit more up to date, 60 years ago, the work of a German immigrant architect that went to the States to get fame and wealth. Frank Lloyd Wright Mies van der Rohe designed the Seagram building, which is still really the template for the modern office building. It's still, for those of you that know New York and you see this building, it still is a fantastic piece of iconic modern architecture. But we still build buildings essentially like that today. This is one of ours. This is the Shanghai Tower, 632 meters tall. That's bigger than anything we've got in Europe. I think the tallest building in Europe right now is the Shard in London. This is twice the height of the Shard. So it puts it into some perspective of a very large building. But essentially, this building is still an office building with a center core. It's kind of mixed use, I should say. It's not just office, but it's a place of work, but it's still a tall building, central core, and typical kind of floor plates. But actually, cities were and still are really founded on two fundamental driving principles. The idea of synchrony, that everybody comes to the city at the same time in the morning and everybody leaves at the same time in the evening, and co-location. So synchrony and co-location, people coming to the same place at the same time. But I believe, and I'll expand on this in my talk, I believe that never before in the history of mankind has time and space been more dislocated than they are right now. We're living in a globalized economy, we're living in a hyper-connected economy, we're living in an increasingly digital world. And I think that the value of places, of cities, is really, really strong and should endure. So if we think about workplaces and the sort of history of the office as a building type, it really started sort of 40 years ago with the invention of the personal computer, when the computer left the computer floor that we would have in office buildings. We'd have whole floors with these machines with tapes and wheels turning around with lots of flashing lights, and it landed on the desk. And when that happened 40 years ago, we needed a completely different building typology. We needed to create buildings almost like machines for housing the technology. As technology progressed into the 90s and started to become more mobile, we actually looked at different ways of how you actually provide the right environments and the conditions to make people's work kind of better. But now, more up to date, we're now really focused on very different types of things in the working environment. We're focused on things like effectiveness, productivity, satisfaction, well-being. I'll talk about that in more detail later on. But the future is now. The future is here. And when we think about the future and why we are in the stage that we are in society right now, where technologies have advanced to such an extent that we're all of us kind of obsessing about robotics, automation, etc. We've always been fascinated with the future. In 1932, this guy, Lincoln Steffens, said, I've seen the future and it works. We've always been fascinated by the future. We're always thinking that in the future, technology will provide the answer. In 1957, 60 years ago, the Rand Corporation was illustrating the first examples of the driverless car. This is what cars in the future would look like when you don't have to drive them. You can spend the precious time with your family driving to the office and doing your homework and playing games in the back of your car in this perfect driverless world. And everything now, you can't pick up a newspaper without actually reading something about autonomous vehicles and how they're going to take over the world. Well, we're not there yet. You know, for those of you that saw this, this is the great example of the coming together of technology and human beings. The technology is kind of there. The technology is very much in its infancy, but it's pretty good. We can have driverless cars. The problem is when you mix driverless cars with human beings driving cars, is you get this. You get somebody driving into the Uber driverless Volvo and knocking it over. So technology isn't there yet. Humans aren't there yet to keep up with the technology. So I think the interaction of humans and technology is going to be a continued narrative going forward in the future. As a firm, we do a lot of research, and we do a lot of research into the future of work. We're kind of a bit obsessed about that. And one of our kind of poster-child research projects is called the Workplace Survey. Workplace Survey, we started back in 2005, and we've been doing this survey every few years. The last one was 2016, where we did the first kind of global survey of workplace effectiveness. And what we're looking at is what is happening within organizations all around the world, and how is the nature of work changing, and how is it affecting people. What we developed over that same period was something called a Workplace Performance Index. This is actually the largest database of workplace effectiveness that exists in the industry. About 240,000 people have taken this survey, including here in Bratislava. We have actually done a WPI survey here in Bratislava, so it's not just kind of US, this is all over. We've done them in Italy, in Germany, in Scandinavia, in Asia. And we have almost 250,000 people's opinions of what's happening in the workplace. And our research, the Workplace Survey, is based on the findings of this database. The WPI is essentially an online questionnaire, and it's asking people to rate and rank the effectiveness of their working environment. And one of the things that comes out of that survey is that we can map an organization based on what we call 4 primary modes of work modes. That you come to work to do, we come to work to do one of 4 main activities. You come to work to concentrate, so that's focus. You come to work to collaborate with your colleagues. You come to work to socialize with your colleagues, and you come to work to learn from other people. So what's happening in these modes of work? Since our research in 2008, surprisingly, we found that things are getting worse in the office environment, not better. You know, often when you think about technology, when you think about those images of the driverless cars, you think about new technological applications, we all have this utopian idea that technology is there to make our lives easier and to make our lives better. That's not the picture here. This is not a picture of technology actually improving people's lives at work. This is a picture of technology taking over people's lives and actually creating conditions in these 4 primary work modes which are actually declining, and they're declining even further. So what are we going to do about it, and why is it happening? It's happening because since 2008, nearly 10 years ago, I think the world has changed. The world has turned on its head. If you think about technology, in 2008, Apple had only just launched the iPhone 1 year. So the very first version of the iPhone was on the market in 2008. And if you think about that piece of technology that all of us have and all of you are using right now, which is great. Smartphone technology, it's okay, really. You can tweet as much as you want. All that new technology, smartphone technology, has completely revolutionized the way in which we consume information. The way in which we consume data over the internet now is much higher on mobile devices than it is on fixed lines, and that's just going to continue. You think about social media. In 2008, Facebook had 100 million users. Now it has, what, 1.5 billion? Nobody had ever really heard of Twitter in 2008. I think it was in its infancy. And, you know, let's not forget that in 2008 we had probably the worst, deepest, most impactful global recession in living memory. So the world has really changed in since 2008. But primarily, I think one of the things that's happened is, like Elvis, work has left the building. So you don't need to go to the office to do your work anymore. So what is the purpose of the office? Because nowadays, all you need is connectivity, right? You just need to be connected to work. So you can work now anytime, any place, everywhere. And this is actually the biggest issue and the biggest challenge, I believe, that is facing organizations. It's this idea that if you can email me at midnight, that somehow I'm compelled to answer your email at midnight. You know, it's very interesting here in Europe that certain countries and certain companies are legislating against answering emails outside of office hours. So what is a regular office hour if you're working in a global economy and you're working in a global organization? So I think one of the things that's really happening across all of the organizations that we work with is they're trying to learn new techniques of how to deal with technology, new techniques with how to deal with a hyper-connected society and a hyper-connected workforce. There was a time before even I was born, in the 1950s, that you had to sit at your desk to get stuff done. That to be productive, you had to sit at a thing called a desk. But I don't believe that's the case anymore. I believe that we're in an age now where the poor guy, I was going to say something bad then, but I'll be polite. The poor guy that's sitting in the office alone, working, is being less and less and less productive. And we see this modern day version of this in all of our offices all around the world, in the States, in the UK, etc. So I think we need to be looking at different ways of measuring stuff, measuring performance. You know, in our industry, we've been kind of obsessing about measuring space, how space is used over time for many, many years. But I think that we're actually kind of at the end of that. I wrote this piece last year called The End of Efficiency, ? Are we actually at the stage now where we shouldn't be thinking so much about real estate efficiency and about how much the buildings are costing us? Because ultimately, the biggest cost to any organization is human capital. Human capital is the largest cost of any organization. Real estate accounts for about 20% of it. The rest is people. So how can we create environments that enable people to thrive? That's really what we're all about in my firm. That's really what my team is all about. We're trying to understand how can we create conditions that make people thrive. And I'm going to show you a few examples that are at the end. However, there's a bit of a problem. Because meanwhile, back in the office, back in the cubicle, it's kind of open warfare. People are terrified, literally terrified of what open plan working might do for them. I've been in this industry for 25 years, and I've never seen so much bad publicity about open plan spaces. They're going to make you less productive. They're going to make you stressed out. They're going to make you ill. Well, there's substance to some of those articles, and they're worth reading because all our clients read them. But we need to think differently about what type of environments we're creating. One of the things that we found in our research is that it's these two factors, autonomy and choice, that are the new measures and the new conditions for productivity and satisfaction. When we look at organizations that actually give autonomy and choice to their employees, guess what happens? It goes the other way. So people who are given autonomy and choice of where and when to do their work, they actually find that they are their effectiveness, their personally rated effectiveness in the WPI survey improves, doesn't decline. So I'm just going to pause there, and we're going to do a little bit of a vote, okay? So I'm going to ask you to raise your hands when I click through these images about where you had your last great idea. Where were you when you had your last great idea? These are just 4 images that I've randomly selected. You don't have to raise your hand at all, but it'd be good if you did. So the first one, A, maybe going for a run. Any takers? We got 2. We got a few here. Okay. Next one, going for a walk, maybe at the weekend. Yeah. That's pretty good. Good. You're connected with nature. What about this one? First thing in the morning or last thing at night? Only 1? 2. There's a few. So far, walking is coming. Walking in the woods is a good thing, right? To have a good idea. What about this one? One guy. Oh, don't be shy. 2 people had their last great idea at their desk. Well, it is possible to have great ideas at the desk, but what is this telling us about the working environment? What is this telling us about the conditions of the office as a building type, about a place to have great ideas and innovation? So in our 2016 survey, we actually published what we call an innovation index. We looked at the companies that are more innovative and less innovative. And it was an outsourced research. It's very rigorously done. And what we found was the people in the higher innovation group spend less time in the office than those in the lower innovation group. So this is telling us something about the people, like that guy that was sat in the office when everybody else had gone home, who were kind of stuck in the office with no choice and no autonomy about where they do their work. These are the people that are kind of suffering. And in our UK workplace survey on this very point, we talked about a world of the haves and the have-nots. That it was the UK workplace, as it stands today, is overwhelmingly favoring those in managerial positions. That is, the people who are in managerial positions that have autonomy and have choice that are actually more innovative than those that don't have the choice and are kind of stuck and rooted to the same spot every day, trying to do the same tasks every day. So what we're always looking for is we're looking for what drives innovation, creativity, satisfaction in organizations. And our workplace survey found that it's really a combination of these 3 things. It's the workplace itself, it's the environment itself, it's the meaning, the sense of meaning, and there's a lot being written right now about the meaning and the purpose economy. I'm sure you've been reading it. And relationships with others. So a combination of these 3 things is really what creates the right conditions for an environment which is going to help your people thrive. When my colleague Lara was here, she gave a great presentation about generations and the differences between generations. And she and I are good friends, so she won't mind me saying this. She and I have a slightly different view of that, and it's maybe that she's 20 years younger than me, and I'm just, bitter. But actually, I think that when it comes to the working environment, certainly our own research has shown that there's no statistically significant difference between generations in an office environment about what they need to do their task, whether it's a concentrated task or a collaborative task. But I think there is something out there, this is very interesting, and it's what I call the Generation S, which is nothing to do with age, it's just to do with attitude towards sharing. I think we're living in an age now where the incredible growth of the co-working movement is really just being stimulated by the fact that we're now living in an age of the sharing economy. And we have a generation of people that are quite open to sharing stuff, right? Sharing themselves, sharing their houses on Airbnb, sharing cars, sharing knowledge. All of these things previously wouldn't have happened. It's not the selfie generation. This is not to be confused with those narcissistic millions of people around the world taking selfies, although in itself, Twitter is also going to evolve, right? So, this is 2 years ago, the terrorist attack in Paris, that a global protest movement against terrorism was mobilized on Twitter within 24 hours. It's very interesting. Look at the heat map of where the hashtag #IamCharlie was retweeted 6,500 times a minute all around the world within 24 hours. That mobilized in every major city around the world a protest movement. It also, it's very interesting to see this map and see the dark parts of the world where there were no tweets, right? This is telling us something about areas of the world which do not have freedom of information. And this is something which we need to be aware of. Twitter kind of helped President Trump get elected, right? So we need to be aware of the impact of social media. But I think as it comes to the idea of sharing, the sharing economy and the sharing generation, this is one of the really key driving forces of the co-working movement. And we're going to hear more about that from our next speaker, I think. So, what we find very interesting about the co-working movement is not necessarily the design of these spaces, but what's happening inside them, and why is it that it's growing. So I think it's this combination of 40–50% of the people that are in employment all around the world will be working in the gig economy. They'll be working as freelancers for themselves, and they need places to go. They also like to connect with others as they're actually working in these spaces. And we find that with the new generation of technologies, connectivity is allowing you to kind of work everywhere. So these are the things that are really underpinning and driving change within co-working. So I want to just talk finally about a couple of case studies. This is a project that we're extremely proud of. This is Etsy in New York. This is their new global headquarters in Brooklyn. Etsy is a fantastic organization. If you don't know them, I would look them up. But this project, we're very proud to be associated with this because this project has got the very first Living Building Challenge certification. The Living Building Challenge is kind of taking sustainability to another level because it's an old building, so the building itself has been recycled. There's greenery everywhere, so this integration of plants and nature into our working environments, I think, is becoming more important as people understand more about biophilic design. It gives you the freedom, this idea of autonomy and choice. It gives you the freedom to actually choose the type of space that you want to work in. And it also has access to the outside, which is very important. I think it's more easily achieved in cities like Bratislava. The scale of the city is, not like New York or London. Although interestingly, in both of those cities, one of the very interesting things that's happening with developers in any new development, people are wanting terraces now. Even in London, where the weather is not exactly great for at least half the year, and the air quality is not great, people want access to the outdoors. And they use locally crafted and sourced furniture. One of the things about the Living Building Challenge is that it uses materials from within something like a 5–8 kilometer radius of the actual location. So you're not importing material and goods from the other side of the world. It's very, very kind of what you might call hyper-local. So, and you can look it up on, there's a great video on the Living Building Challenge, which explains this project. So going up a scale, this is work in Dublin for one of our clients that has to remain confidential, but let's put it this way, they're a very well-known technology company. This is their European headquarters in Dublin, and we were asked to come in and effectively do the workplace design and the strategy for the interiors of the building. And this client wanted a different kind of narrative about a workplace. So we did a slightly bizarre thing. We asked our landscape architects to actually plan the space, and this is what the first thing came up with. And they came up with this idea of a trail through the landscape. So using the office as a metaphor, using the landscape as a metaphor for exploration as you go through the office. And this is how it's actually transpired. So this is the floor plan, and the area in yellow is the trail. That's the place that you move around the building. And interestingly, only 50% of this floor plate is desks. The rest of it are spaces which are just there to work. And so we're using, because it's an island, and we're using the metaphor of the dock, using a lot of industrial materials, and a story, a journey of moving from the dock through the trail to these type of spaces. Again, these type of spaces which are about exploration, and they're not sort of conventional workplaces. And this is again a CGI of the atrium space, which has a digital lake at the bottom and a digital waterfall which goes into the lake. It's going to be very cool. It should be finished this year, and hopefully we'll have some pictures of the finished article. But for the same well-known technology organization, we just completed a project in London for their gaming teams. So this is a very interesting example of, and maybe giving you some clues about, what workplaces might look like in the future. So this is the kind of workshop area. So, is this an office, or is it a workshop? Is it a garage? Well, it's kind of both, because this is where the kids create new games for the different consoles that people play games on, and for virtual reality headsets. This is the kind of environment that they need. These are the type of environments that these technology companies need. Every single place here, you could argue, is a place to work. Even the drum set, that's a place where you could go and hammer out some of your frustrations and then get back to work. You don't need to do it at a desk. So I think, we're going to see this kind of world in the future in working environments, which is a lot less desks and a lot more kind of areas of variety. So finally, I think I mentioned this earlier in my talk, that I think there's one thing that we need to kind of hold on to, which is this: that actually in an increasingly digital world, where we're all kind of spending at least half of our time in kind of virtuality, I think there's a real enduring value to place, to cities, to workplaces, to offices in an increasingly digital world. So thank you very much for listening.
Váš potlesk pre Filipa Tidas zo spoločnosti Gensler London. Teraz je čas na otázky, takže ak ste ešte doteraz neboli na slajdo, nech sa páči, choďte, zadajte tie otázky, ja sa hneď spýtam na úvod. So, the first questions will be from me. You haven't raised your hand while asking about the last great idea. So, when and where you had your last great idea?
It was maybe on the walk from the hotel to here this morning, and I saw in the street a really cool coffee cart, and I just got a little espresso and then came here. So it was when I was, it was certainly when I was outside, and it was when I was walking and going somewhere that was new. So it was a bit of exploration.
Okay, and talking about space and workspace, how your workspace looks like. You were presenting us, different ideas, but how your workspace looks like.
Yeah, I didn't show you photographs of our office. Actually, we have got many, many really beautiful offices all around the world. But our office in London right now doesn't look too pretty because we're moving in 4 weeks. And so it's like a sea of boxes already. We're starting to dismantle stuff. But we're moving about 2 kilometers from our current location to a temporary space, which is in a building next to the building that we'll finally occupy in about 1.5 years. So we're going to be in temporary space for 1.5 years, and we've designed that project as what we're calling base camp. So it's like when you go to climb to the top of the mountain, first you need to set up base camp. So we're designing the new space as base camp. Very rough, very kind of raw, using kind of simple, cheap materials, because we know that we're only going to be in that space for about 1.5 years. And when we move in at the end of May, and so once we've kind of settled in a little bit, anybody here is welcome to come and visit us in the new office.
You already have some kind of your corner in mind over there?
No, I don't have territory. I just work where I can,
Okay, so let's go for the questions from the audience. The first one, what is your view of companies reducing home working arrangements for employees and forcing them to work from the office? Yahoo, IBM, for instance.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's been all over the press about Marissa Mayer's kind of statement of, cancel home working, get everybody back in the office. This is just a cycle. This just goes around and comes around all the time. And I think that there is a lot of value in bringing people together. I think one could argue that for Yahoo, well, it's also been in the press that one of the reasons that Yahoo did that was that their culture was broken, and you can't fix a culture remotely. You have to bring people together. So I think being in the office is about social capital and actually exchanging with your colleagues. But if you remember that slide I showed from the research, it doesn't mean you need to be there every day, every hour of every day for the whole week, right? So it's about finding the optimum amount of time that you should be in the office.
Okay, why is the interest for workspaces growing so much? We kind of answered that already a little bit. What is the typical workspace for you? We touched that, but maybe when you're not in the office and you're out of the office, where do you go to work?
Yeah, I work wherever I can, you know, get what I need to get done.
Wi-Fi connection.
Well, it's not just about that, obviously, because sometimes, actually, okay, here's an idea. One of the worst things that the airline industry is offering is free Wi-Fi on an airplane, right? Tomorrow I go from here to London and straight out to Denver. I don't want to be, you know, checking my emails. I want to be sleeping, reading, you know, watching a few movies. So this idea that, you know, you're constantly connected, I think is not so great. I think actually one of the things that I wrote in that article was that I think, you know, conversely, the key to productivity is disconnectivity, not connectivity. So I think to be really productive, you need to switch off all your devices, and you need to just really zoom in on a task. And it's very difficult to do that when you're constantly being attacked by all kinds of technologies, your phone, your computer, your instant messaging, your Facebook, your Twitter, you know, it's all coming at you. Sometimes you just have to, you know, go away from it.
Yeah, that's the next question. In case of spending 20 years in cell office, can be quite difficult. Switch mind for open space. Okay, to switch from the normal office, cell office to open office, how can we do it easier for these employees? I think the new offices, the open office concept is good for the maybe younger generation, but the older one, they've spent 30 years in a little cell by their own, and now they have to go somewhere where they can interact with people. It's horrifying.
It can be. It can also be good. So it depends on your mindset. But I think, and actually, I think that even the younger generation of people also need quiet space. And certainly, one of the things that our UK survey showed up was the highest performing space in terms of innovation was an enclosed office. Now, that doesn't mean an enclosed office that belongs to a manager. It means an enclosed space where I can have quiet, concentrated time. In terms of all types of space, a collaboration bench in a cafe with a gaming and a drum set, the space that was rated the highest in terms of its effectiveness to get a task done was an enclosed office. So, of course, now a lot of clients are coming back to us and say, hey, we told you we shouldn't get rid of our enclosed offices. Well, actually, we should have done, because they weren't good either. So it's not like, black and white. It's much more kind of nuanced than that.
We have more questions coming up. If 40% of people will work as freelancers, what happens to our generation who prefers normal offices? Well, we already kind of touched that. What is the typical? We already had that. You were talking about locally crafted furniture. Isn't it specific for US market people, how it is in Europe?
No, I would argue that in Europe we've got so much more variety, right? And we've probably got a lot more craftsmen and people. You think of Italy, you think of, well, this country, you think of Germany, a lot of people still really making stuff. And I think one of the reasons it's taken off in the US is because they've moved away from that and they're trying to sort of get back to that. But certainly the whole thing around making stuff is extremely popular and growing in the UK, for example, as well. And I personally think it's an antithesis to, or a counter movement to technology. It's about, I want to make something with my hands rather than just, make something virtually.
Oh, you were mentioning that the building from Etsy, which is in New York.
Yeah.
But in New York, distance 8 kilometers, you're still in New York.
Well,
or you are in Chinatown. And then
it's in Brooklyn.
Okay.
And I mean, I don't know whether it's 5 kilometers, 8 kilometers, but it's basically pretty much all of the furniture in that office came from Brooklyn, not Manhattan.
Okay.
So that's local, So.
Okay. We already had, and we have the next one. What are the top things that surprise you or change your point of view in last 5 years in terms of office design? Since the office design is changing quite fast, what is for you lesson learned from the last years?
Yeah, so I would even say the last 3 years, the big lesson for me is the research that we've been doing about the effectiveness of open collaborative spaces. I think what's happened, I mean, you know, as an architect and a designer, we've been recommending and designing these places, these kind of open, get everybody out of their cellular offices into open so they can collaborate. We've been doing that. But I think what's happened is technology has advanced so quickly and people haven't caught up with it. What they're finding is that those types of environments aren't suited for everybody. And also I think, you know, there's this whole thing out there about introverts and extroverts, that introverted people find those environments of being like in the game room of that technology client, they find those very hard to concentrate and they find those very hard to work in. So for me, it's been a bit of a personal revolution and a real eye-opening moment to realize that actually we need to change our thinking about workplace design, because all of those collaboration areas, they are important. But the other aspects are we need to create environments which allow people to pick and choose the type of space that suits the task they need to do.
Okay, the next one, do you see Google as a trendsetter on the market?
Yes and no. I mean, you know, I always say, I mean, they're a client of ours, so I have to be careful. But they are a trendsetter in many ways. And I think on the one hand, Google has done a great service to the industry in opening up people's minds about what's possible. On the other hand, I think they've done a great disservice to the industry, because now everybody wants a slide in their environment, and everybody wants free food, and everybody wants stuff that Google has. And what we often say to our clients, and you might surprisingly, you might even have, you know, very large, well-known investment banks that say, I want a Google-like office. And our answer is usually pretty straightforward, is, well, you're not Google. You know, and that environment works for Google. It doesn't work for other organizations. It might work for other tech companies, but even the other tech companies like Facebook or Twitter, their environments aren't, you know, it's not like a uniform design solution that works for everybody. And I think what you have to find is you have to find the right solution for the right organization. So in that sense, it's been good because they've opened people's minds, but on the other hand, you know, everybody thinks we'll just be like Google, and that's not going to work.
It doesn't work for everybody. The next question is from Dalibor Slavik. Who is leader in such workspace transition, old countries or emerging market countries?
Well, it depends what your definition of an old country is. I think the UK is an old country, and I think it's quite progressive. I think the Netherlands is also very experimental. But, you know, let's not forget the US. I mean, the US was in my opinion, for many, many years, was, if you think about the typical North American workplace, it was a sea of cubicles with, you know, people looking very sad sitting in the cubicle, like that picture of the guy with the big glasses and surrounded by paperwork. For many years in the US, that was your typical North American workplace. That's changing very rapidly, and we have the tech companies to thank for that. The tech companies have really thought differently about workplace design. But certainly, I think you know, I think there's a lot of great stuff happening in Europe as well.
Hopefully in Slovakia too.
Yes.
How big will be your next workspace? That's the last question we've got.
Big enough.
I mean, the whole world. You're traveling a lot with the Gensler.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Philip.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen. This is something I need to carry. From Gensler, Head of Consulting there in London office.